Alrighty, welcome back everybody. It is, I just got the date, Sunday the 19th of Feb 2023, and that makes today day 50. You'll have to forgive me because this episode is going to be boring, and because I am extremely tired. I went out today fishing with my uncle, my wife's uncle by marriage. I married my wife and he married her auntie, and so we really got no business hanging out. We both married into the family. I guess that's why we are just vibing, and we have those like that, a bit more of a connection because we both married into the family. Anyway, I had a good day. It was a fucking sick day. I caught a couple fish. I haven't been fishing in a long time, so it was like very therapeutic. I feel like I might have said it on the podcast, but I used to fish when I was a kid a lot. And I feel like that it's just like bringing me back to my childhood a little bit. It healed my inner child today, which was nice. It was a fun trip, and it was good being around my nephew. He's 5 years old, and I just remember being his age and being out, how annoying I must have been when I was a little kid, I was a bit older, but it reminded me of a story. I'm going to tell that story right now. So I didn't really have contact with my real dad, my biological father, for too long. I knew him. I've mentioned on here before. Sorry, I looked away for a second. My leg was itchy. I met him once when I mentioned on one of the episodes. Sorry, I met him in a bread aisle when I was 7 years old, and between the age of 7 and 9, nearly 10. We had contact, and every other weekend, Mum would let us go. I think it was every weekend or every other weekend, we'd go to Bateman's Bay, to my grandparents' house. They had a big house up on a coastal house, right up on the cliff, overlooking Malua Bay. And it was a big place. When they originally bought it, it was just like a little dinghy, little shack, and we ended up being like a big 6-room house, 2 stories. They built like their own sort of stairs that led all the way down to the beach, like a private entrance to the beach. And it was just a sick place to go, but it sucks that the family sucked. But we went out one time with my real dad, and we went fishing with one of his mates. So we went somewhere, and his mate had this really nice boat. It was really cool. We had to sit down, had to wear life vests, whatever. We were doing all the donuts and stuff, having a bit of fun out in the water. It was good. It was a good day. But I really had to pee. Like, I really had to piss my pants. I was like, I needed to go to the bathroom. And I didn't really know my dad very well. And so I didn't know how to tell him that I really had to pee, and I didn't want to be a sook and complain. And looking back on it, I was probably told to shut up. I probably was talking a lot and asking a lot of questions, and had at that point been told, like, just stop talking, we'll be back on shore soon. But soon was a little while. We had gone a long way from where we were putting the boat back on the what's it called? The trailer. And so I just like sat in a corner and quietly pissed my pants. And it was fine because I figured the guy's going to wash his boat out, and I just really had to pee, and we had to jump out in the water. Like, as we got there, we weren't allowed to sit in the boat. And so I think about that. I think about how my real dad took me, a kid he barely knew, out with a mate in a mate's boat, and I pissed in his mate's boat. And I think that's a funny story, and it reminded me today of that, because I needed to pee at some point, and I didn't piss in the boat because, we're only gone for a couple of hours. I'm sorry if you can hear my wife's cooking in the background. We were just hanging out, so I didn't really need to pee or anything like that. We weren't out for very long. But it was an early start. I got up at 3:20 and I left by 3:40, and I got there at 4. I got to their house at 4, and then we took off at 4. We got out there by 6. We were on the boat, and we were throwing lines in by like 6:30, and we were there until about 1:30. So what was that? 7 hours of fishing. It was a big day, but it was cool because we ended up catching a couple whiting, a couple salmon, and a flathead, which is pretty cool. And whiting apparently is pretty expensive at the moment, like $99 a kilo or something. And I got about 1.5 kilos of it in my fridge, and I'm balling out of control over here. But fishing is it's very therapeutic for me. I feel like it's very fun. I remember the first time I caught my first fish. Actually, I got a lot of like trauma that as a child that goes around fishing. My biological dad was a fisherman. He was an angler. Like, he'd go out all the time. That's why we always went to the coast. He lived on the coast growing up. Fishing was just part of his life. They had all this sort of fishing gear and stuff. Anyway, I got a fishing rod and I went fishing. And my first time I caught an actual fish. I used to go and cast lines out and stuff and try and fish, but I'd never catch anything. And then one day, Mum, where we used to live, our townhouse backed onto like a pond, like a pond. I want to say a lake. It was a lake. It was in Tuggeranong, in all the way over in Gordon. I can't remember the name of the lake, but I want to say maybe it was Lake Gordon. And so our townhouse backed onto that, and so we went. I used to go fishing down like just behind the house, within earshot. If Mum came out and she yelled "Mitch," then I could run back to the house. And so one day I went fishing, and I got no concept of time. I'm a little kid. Right, it's daylight savings time. The sun's not setting. Like right now, it's 8:26, and the sun's still kind of out. I mean, it's like not fully dark. I can still see. And so I went fishing a little bit further because I was hanging out riding bikes with the big kids during the day, and those kids showed me a fishing spot where they caught fish all the time. And I was like, "That's so cool. Maybe if I come here and I fish, I'll catch a fish." And so I went and I set myself up down there. And looking back, it's probably a really dangerous move because I was young. I would have been 9. I wasn't in contact with Colin, so it would have been like just before my 10th birthday, around 10. And I cast the line out and I sit there and I wait and I wait and I wait. Nothing's coming in. I was like, oh, whatever. And so I start to reel in my line so I can pack it up and go home. And as it's coming into shore, lo and behold, I've got this tiny little redfin on my line, and I can remember the feeling. I was so excited. I was so stoked, and I couldn't get the hook out of its mouth. I put it up on the land. I couldn't get the hook out of its mouth. I couldn't really do anything, and so I just let it flop around, and I cut my line long enough so that I could wrap it around my hand and carry the fish back with me. And so I took my little tackle box and I pulled my rod apart because I wasn't going to be able to. I had my rod and my tackle box in one hand and I had my fish in the other hand, and I'm like running back down this path. And I'm so excited. Like, I was elated. I just caught my first ever fish, and I did it with no assistance. I did it by myself. It was what I've been practicing for my whole life. You know, you know what I mean? Anyway, we get down. I'm coming home and I'm within earshot, and I see Mum is out on the veranda and she's clearly just been yelling my name, and I went further than I was supposed to, and so I'm running up. I'm like, "Mum, look, I caught my first fish," and Mum said something to the effect of, "I don't care. Why did you disobey my orders? Why were you so far away?" And I said. And then I explained to her about how the big kids showed me the fishing spot. And I wanted to go to that fishing spot, and she couldn't come with me because she was cooking dinner, and I didn't have anyone else to go with. So I ran down there. You know, I was responsible, whatever. But a single mum who's terrified of, biological father coming back, or, even just terrified of kidnapping in general, just wasn't having a bar of it. And I remember I went from being like the most excited and the most happy I'd ever been in my life to feeling pretty shit. Feeling pretty fucking like, man, I just caught a fish. This is a big moment. It's a big milestone. And at 10, that year was 1/10 of my life. So all the other stresses the likelihood of, you know, some sort of creep trying to steal me or anything it had been hammered into me. But are you kidding, bro? No one's gonna steal me. You know what I mean? And so I was pretty bummed out. And I feel like there's a trauma there like there should be more trauma there. I should be more upset about that, but I'm not. I forgot about it until today. Until I was telling that story, the first time I ever caught a fish. And that was because today, I was fishing for 20 minutes off like the right-hand side or the left-hand side of the boat, the passenger side of the boat. And no luck. And so I pull my rod in and I say, all right, someone else have a go. And my little nephew was like, hey, can we put my rod in? And he'd been really annoying up until that point. And so his dad, was like, yeah, all right, no worries, mate. And he was like, yeah, I want to do a long cast. And the long cast was going to throw it out into the reeds where the fish were fishing for whiting, and they hang out in the reeds and they come into the sand to eat. They don't eat where they live, I guess. I don't know how it works. But so this rod gets thrown out and within a minute, I wouldn't even say a minute, it landed on this fucking fish's head. And they caught a flathead. And it was Cooper's first ever big fish. It was his first flathead. It was his first ever bigger fish. Now, did he reel it in? No. Did he pull it into the boat, help at all? No, not really. He just watched it happen. But it happened on his rod just after he asked for it to be cast out. And so he claimed it as his fish. And you know, no one else is going to sit there and be like, no. So we let him have it. But I remember that excitement. I could see the excitement on his face, and I could just see it. And I was like, man, I'm here for that. You know what I mean? I gave him his flowers, even though he did none of the work. I can understand this. It was the same excitement that I had when I had done all the work and no one had appreciated it. Or was as excited about it before they were worried about something else. We could have been more worried about the fact that he didn't pull that in, and we could have tried to tell him it wasn't his fish, but you know, we just let it be. Let him do his thing. Anyway, I went fishing today and I healed my inner child.